To bring in Agapi Gessesse into the conversation. She's Executive Director of the CEE Center. Agapi, thank you so much for joining us. We've been having these conversations about what you're seeing and not seeing in the community, but now, of course, around this election, race and discrimination, and now coupled in with the pandemic not being addressed. What is your take here? What have you been experiencing? What are you hearing from your community?
Well, I think that we're hearing kind of this ignoring of folks, right? We're not being addressed head on as candidates are talking about things. And the only time we're really hearing about racialized groups are when racialized candidates are actually running and talking about that, because clearly, you know, they're part of these communities and they understand what's going on. But I'm not necessarily hearing naming and calling things, especially in the midst of all of the communities who have been disproportionately affected by COVID. Those are the folks who want to hear, what is recovery going to look like, and are we included? And I don't really hear that being talked about as much as it definitely should be.
How concerning is that for you then, Agapi? Because it's a never-ending conversation. It has to go beyond a headline.
It has to go beyond a headline. We have to move from chatter to action. And I think the biggest fear that I have is that our community is already kind of disconnected from the political process and doesn't see themselves in it and don't really think that their votes necessarily count. And when we're not being reflected in platforms and talked about directly, especially when we're in the midst of a crisis in our communities. So when those conversations are not being had, it just makes people even more apathetic to the process and feel like it doesn't matter what I do anyways, this is just kind of how it's going to be. And that's extremely problematic to our democratic process, and also in ensuring that all Canadians are represented when we are making decisions politically.
Yeah, certainly. Amy, when we now are coupled then, and we're seeing this during this election campaign with misinformation, and this is a very emotional election campaign, and that is also being played into this. What's the concern?
The concern is whenever you play into emotions, people who have been perhaps economically disenfranchised, who have been disenfranchised in general with regards to government and public health, that's when people can latch on to what they want to hear in misinformation. And the people who are feeding the misinformation are happy to kind of capitalize on what they're hearing as fears or grievances and capitalize on that. And that's what makes this whole misinformation pandemic so frightening and so terrifying. And then when they are coupling it with race and anti-immigration sentiments, it becomes very much a powerful movement that we actually need to address head on.
I apologize, I've just got a minute left, but Naheed, give me your thoughts here. What's the concern?
I think the concern is that as Canadians, we often think that this kind of activity happens in the United States. And when it happens here, we're shocked and we act like this is just not like us. Well, it is. It's happened. It's happening right in front of us. We are seeing white supremacy in action and misinformation and how it's intertwining with, systemic racism in our society. Let's stop talking about it. Whether it's happening or not, it's happening. Let's make moves. Let's create action. Maybe that's the silver lining of conversations like this.
Certainly, Agapi, if those voices, however, on the political realm aren't being represented, aren't being heard, it's a dangerous path.
Yeah, it is a dangerous path, but I think that it's the responsibility, and although it shouldn't be, it's a responsibility of organizations like mine and Black Vote Canada, who are really trying to push the agenda of Black communities in particular and getting them to get civically engaged. And I think that the politicians have a huge responsibility. They need to step up and they need to start engaging with our community. Otherwise, we're going to continue to be overrepresented in all of the wrong places. And I often say I don't think this generation is going to stand for it.
Well, we will see where things go. September 20th is the big day for Canadians, big decision day, of course, for our party leaders. Naheed Dosani, Health Equity Lead, and Kensington Health, Dr. Amy Tan, Family and Palliative Care Physician, and Agapi Gessesse, Executive Director of the CEE Center. It is great, an honor, as always, to speak with all three of you. Thank you so much for this.